Pastor Jeremy Mack here, back to talk to you about what we call at Solomon's Porch timeless discipleship. This will be part 4 of that, and we're in the creation mandates. The creation mandates are found in Genesis 1:28 and in Genesis 2, 2 and 3. I would actually expand that if I was teaching something more complete. It would actually be 1:27 all the way through to 3, as far as having a full orbed understanding of the creation mandates. But for the principles that we're going to lay out here, it's 1:28 and then chapter 2, 2 and 3. Let's read those. And God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So God blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Let me remind you quickly of the premise that we use. So we're talking about timeless discipleship, and when we're talking about something that's timeless, so we're not saying ancient necessarily, though we do look to the ancient church. We look to the historic church. Historicity, or we're historically rooted, we say, is very important to us. You know, we confess the Nicene Creed before we take the Lord's Supper. We should take the Lord's Supper every week. We're confessionally bound in the Westminster Confession as far as those things. So we have a good deal of historicity here. But one of the things we want to do is we also want to root our discipleship in a broader understanding of what it means to be Christian, not just to teach a certain set of Christian actions like prayer and giving and things like that. Now, of course, we will deal with those what we call the means of grace later on. But right now, we're introducing the premise that really discipleship is much more than just a certain set of practices as Christians, that we do believe the practices are extremely important. So our premise of discipleship is that Christ carries us into a higher order of humanity. That's what Jesus means. When he says you must be born again, or there we talk in terms of the new birth, or we talk in terms of the new creation, or we talk in terms of being a new man. So when we say that, we mean Christ has elevated us. He's raised us to a higher order, and we will inherit that higher order fully at the second coming, when we are glorified. But we live now with the Holy Spirit within us, and we're undergoing progressive sanctification. And that progressive sanctification leads us to something, which is to be more like Christ. We're being conformed into the image of Jesus Christ, right? So Christ has he's carried us into a higher order of humanity through the gospel, but we manifest righteousness in the fallen order in the old creation. So in some senses, Jesus is both elevating us to a higher order, but while we remain on the earth, he restores us fully to the created order as it was given. And so when we look at the creation mandates, we can see that they are fruitfulness, right? Multiplying and filling the earth. This is marriage and family, right? And you can see that we're supposed to subdue and take dominion over the earth. So subduing and take dominion. And then we are to rest and to worship one day in 7. And so we've sort of given those 4 quick words for us to remember, right? And that's maturity, fruitfulness. In our last couple of videos, we talked a lot about fruitfulness, and fruitfulness can be defined as doing the right things at the right time. Like when you plant an apple tree in the first year, you don't look for apples on it, or year 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, as a matter of fact, that has blossoms on it, you pick them off. And some of the branches you're actually going to take off, and arborists will take them off so that they can't bear fruit, so that you get an apple tree that's gone through all the stages of maturity, endured enough winters, it's strong enough, so you don't keep a real small tree that produces like 2 apples. You grow a big tree that produces a lot. Okay, so maturity has to do with doing the right things at the right time. And that's really important for us to understand how we are fruitful and what it means to be fruitful. A word I would just substitute for fruitful is that we're supposed to be maturing, or in a process of maturity. And the Bible introduces this in 2 forms. We have the material form. We go through a childhood and then an adolescence, young adult, and then we become fathers or mothers. And so And if you look at children in the natural realm, children are generally takers. They don't give a lot. I mean, they give us joy and things like that. But as far as contributing to your home and things like that, they make messes, they destroy things. You have to train them. They're difficult at stages. So they take a lot. They take a lot of energy. And then a young adult matures. And when a young adult matures, they cease to take so much energy. They actually start contributing themselves. They move from being purely takers to becoming both takers and givers. Young adults still need to take. And that's totally legitimate. They still are gaining wisdom. They still are gaining some maturity. They're still making a lot of mistakes. And so they're going to need correction. But they're also starting to give. One day you open up the door and they made their bed and they didn't ask for it. You didn't ask for it. And one day they're doing things, and instead of stepping over trash on the floor, they're picking it up. And so this shows maturity. And then fathers or mothers are givers. They give. They give and they give, and they have a lot to give because they've grown through those stages of maturity. They're no longer children or young adults. They're fathers and mothers. They can bear fruit now. So there's the flip side of that is the spiritual realm from 1 John 2:12-14. Won't read that, but there's child and young man and father there. Okay, so the roles of maturity in the material realm have also an analogous growth in the spiritual realm as well. So the physical and the material or the material and the spiritual are connected. So we're going to move on today and do something pretty quick, and we're going to talk about multiply and fill the earth. So let's just read it. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea and the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. All right, Genesis 1:28. So what does this mean? So being fruitful and multiplying. So we're all jumping to conclusions that we should jump to, right? Being fruitful is maturing, and you grow to a certain point, you do the right things at the right time, right? So if you have children before you marry, you've done the wrong thing at the wrong time, right? If you marry before you learn to work, and we're going to see this as we start taking apart Psalm 128, which will be a very important part of this series in the future. If you marry before you learn to work, oftentimes you have a lot of difficulties keeping roof over both of your heads and things like that. So it's important to do the right things at the right time. So once we've matured and we're fruitful, we multiply and we fill the earth. So marriage then is good and is not to be avoided. Okay, children are good and are not to be avoided. So often, I'm sorry here, my sinuses are bothering me. So often as we go around, we talk to people, we interact with people who are not Christians, we find that there's this idea that marriage is like a weight, the old, there's the old ball and chain, as it is referred to in multiple like sitcoms and just as a standard kind of trope in our society. Our wife or our husband is the old ball and chain. Usually that's husband toward the wife kind of thing, no matter how unfair that is. So, we refer to these things as the old ball and chain. Marriage is sort of like a trap, that men fall into, or that women fall into. And so marriage is to be avoided. Marriage is difficult. People just get divorced. You'll meet people who actually go through bad marriages, and they say, well, I had a bad marriage, so I'm never going to marry again. I'm just not going to marry. We'll just have boyfriend and girlfriend kind of things. And they end up, trying to share property and things like that. And then when it blows apart, it's just extremely difficult to untangle yourself from, or extremely easy to untangle yourself from in many ways. And people are left holding the bags a lot. And so marriage is this institution God puts together so people don't get left holding the bag. There's some legality to it, and there's some accountability to it. There's a role for the church to play. There's also a role in the civil government as well for the civil government to play in these things. And so marriage is not to be avoided. Marriage is good. Children are not to be avoided. Children are good. You hear a lot of people, they'll talk about not, having children. And they'll either say they don't like children, which is very interesting. When we were doing the abolition of man, C.S. Lewis admits in the abolition of man, he says, I really don't enjoy the company of small children. But he follows that up with, but I know, because I know the Tao, and what he means by that is this natural law that God has built into humanity. I know, because I know the Tao, that that's a weakness in me, and it's wrong, right? It's wrong. So many people avoid children because they don't think they'll enjoy the company of children, or they avoid children because they believe they're a financial drain, or they avoid children not just because they're a financial drain, but because they want to redouble those resources into other things, toward pleasure, or toward education, or toward additional monies and houses, or retirement and things like this. And so it's one of the ways that money is the root of all kinds of evil, so that in certain scenarios, people choose money over children. Children aren't to be avoided. Children are good, right? Children are the future. Children carry the work that we do forward. In some day, there's the strange mystery that we don't fully understand. The more we unlock DNA and more we look at the genome, the more a greater mystery it is to us, because we really look at these things, and I might see in my child the smile of my grandfather, or in my child the eyes of a relative I knew, or personality traits from people that I knew that they didn't know, that I don't really have. And it's almost impossible to explain how they transfer like that. But the truth is that we're not only material beings, and that these things are not only material, and we need to move out of this material worldview. Children are not a burden to us. They are a blessing to us. They are the inheritance of the Lord. Avoiding children is one of the is one of the most serious problems that we have, even in our society right now, as people believe, either for various reasons, that children are expensive, or perhaps they're being selfish because we're destroying the planet. So one of the terrible things that's coming out of this materialist worldview that we're all experiencing in the US and in Europe, across the world, really, is the concept that having children is bad, that having more people is bad, that life is bad. It's one of the worst philosophies the history of the world ever produced. This is the kind of thing that leads to Auschwitz, that leads to, because when you say things like they're saying, well, how are they going to remedy it? Well, right now, it's by pure indoctrination. Pure indoctrination. As we came out of the pandemic, everybody expected another baby boom, like what we saw from soldiers returning in World War II. What we got was a baby bust, and we fell below replacement rate for the first time in a long time. And one of the things we don't understand is the richness of children, the value that they add to us that's beyond money, the things that they add to our lives that can't be quantified by dollar bills, the things that occur as we transfer not just our wealth and inheritance and things like that. It's more than that. It's much more than that. We transfer inheritance from the church. We transfer material inheritance of ourselves. We transfer all the work that has been done before we got here. We take it and give it to others. We do the best that we can with it to repair anything that needs to be repaired, but we hand it on. Our responsibility is to hand it on better. But who do we hand it on to if we don't have any children? So children are I even personally judge the health of our body by children. Are we having children? And are new people coming to the Lord? There should be physical children and spiritual children. So you should have this interplay within, because the material and the spiritual cannot be separated. What's important for us to know, however, is the Christian worldview is one with a love for responsibility, a love for duty, and a love for honor. You see, a Christian responsibility doesn't shirk adulthood. It embraces it. It is led, Christianity is led by a patriarchy of elders. It's not, led by a lot of, by children at play. And what I mean by that is the reason that people don't generally have children is because they remain children themselves, because children cannot see the future very well. They can't comprehend the events of their action, their actions, what their actions will cause, the effects of them. They don't properly understand them. So when you see somebody, with like a t-shirt that says something like adulting is hard, you're actually looking likely at someone who's more or less an overgrown child. And children pursue things that are not fruitful. They take, they don't give. And fathers give. So whenever you see people who have reverted to taking, you're seeing people that are pushing off responsibility, pushing off maturity, pushing off fruitfulness. You haven't done the first aspects of maturity, which is ceasing to live merely for your own pleasure, whatever tickles your fancy, whatever you set before your eyes. That's what children do. Men, women, we live for others. We live to serve. We live to sacrifice. We look to honor. We look to take the duties that are supposed to be on us. We don't shirk them. We don't push them away. We don't delay them till we're 25. We don't delay them till we're 30. We don't do those types of things. That's why we want to see Christian children not remain Christian children, and why we have a higher expectation for Christian young adults, which I mean anybody over 12. Christian young adults, we have a higher expectation for Christian young adults than we do for non-Christian young adults often. And it's to our shame sometimes that the children of the church are less righteous sometimes than the children of the world. So as we talk about marriage and family, the first sort of thing we want to say about them is they're good, that they should be embraced, that they are things that should be desired, that they are things that should be prepared for, that we should be maturing through our lives, through childhood, young adult, and then fruitful, like father and mother. And our father and mother have fruit. That's what makes them fruitful, right? We should be translating across those spheres. We should be growing through those. And when we grow to become fathers, by the time we're able to be mature enough in the physical realm to become fathers, we should also at some level be near the age of being spiritual fathers, because children require that you give a lot. But the grace is we're surrounded in the church by wonderful people. And when we're young adults, we have great access to mentors. Lord willing, if you're in a good biblical church, you have access to mentors who are above you, who are already fathers, who can also give some to you as you need when you have small children too. And that's the great thing about having a church that's patriarchal, matriarchal, right? That has the older women teach the younger women, that has the older men teach the younger men. In that way, you can aid them and help them and continue to really give to them while they're in that stage where they're both giving it, but still needing to take. And so that's why the church is even designed the way that it is, with older men leading and not, younger men leading, because we have to be fruitful long enough. We have to born enough fruit, right? That's the requirements even around eldership, is to look at the household, their wife, their children, right? So this is why multiplying and filling the earth, it just right there, foundational for us. And while marriage and family also make up so much of biblical teaching too, because they are the second foundation stone. Once you understand you're supposed to mature and grow through seasons and become a giver, become one who's able to bear fruit, you're supposed to be fruitful. Then the next thing you look at is, well, what is in the material world, what does fruitfulness look like? Well, one of the key ways that fruitfulness is demonstrated in the material world is through reaching maturity, to marry and have children. So they're not to be avoided. They're good things. They're the next stages in your life. And if you're young, I should say, they're the next stages in your life if you're young. And so a youth-oriented culture, which America has, is one that has to be fully repented of. There's a line in Hosea where God tells the people of Israel that they have gray hair, but they do not know it. And I say this with grace, that America in general, because of this youth culture that has risen up and everybody desires to be young, the same thing can be said about us now that was said about Israel then. We have gray hair, and we don't know it. Adulting is hard, and that's why adults do it. So be an adult. Mature. Look to be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. Hold marriage high and hold children in high regard as well. May the Lord richly bless you guys. Hope you enjoy this one. Be back next week with another. We'll talk a little bit more about multiplying and filling the earth then too. Blessings. Bye-bye.